Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, education, and many other aspects of life. We discuss them here and see how they impact our economy. My name is John Masubu. Climate change is almost the buzz phrase these days. We are talking about climate change and its effect, but at times we may not fully know what it is and also how it affects our economic environment, especially those who are in business and the economy in general. And to understand climate change and what it is and how we can also help manage it, we've invited Washington Zhakata, who is the Chief Director, Climate Change and Meteorological Services in the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Washington, welcome to Economic Forum.
Thank you very much.
Yes, climate change. I think people are now beginning to understand a little bit, but help us to understand further what climate change is all about and why there's always this talk about us managing it properly.
Climate change really refers to the changes over a long period of time in terms of the weather patterns, rainfall, even the winds themselves. And the global warming is also part of climate change that is subjected to the world at the moment. So these changes can manifest themselves through a late onset of the season, early cessation of the season, very extended, long dry spells during the course of the season, and some unbearable temperatures that we can be subjected to, like in the year 2024, October, November was totally unbearable across the whole country. Temperatures that we had never seen before. And we noticed that in the years prior to the year 2000, Zimbabwe was not talking much about tropical cyclones. But from the first onset of tropical cyclone Elin that hit Zimbabwe in the year 2000, so many cyclones have hit Zimbabwe. Cyclone Dineo, Cyclone Batsirai, Cyclone Idai. Now Zimbabwe is on the paths of cyclones. So all these changes that are happening, you see even flooding, which we had never seen before. Even the amounts of rainfall, which we had never seen before. Rain, when it comes all of a sudden, and a lot of it one time causing flash flooding in towns, flooding in rivers, among others. But the main issues when we are talking about climate change, which we have to bear in mind are, one, we've got the impacts of climate change, which are becoming very apparent. These we discuss within the framework of climate change adaptation. We want to know how vulnerable are our communities, how vulnerable is the water sector, the health sector, the agricultural sector, the energy sector. All sectors are impacted by climate change one way or the other. You notice in terms of electricity this year, the water levels in Kariba Dam are so low. And so we've got so much extended times of load shedding because of low capacity to generate electricity.
And that affects business.
And it directly affects business. Agriculturally, I think we don't need to mention, we are having more and more droughts from the year 2000. Before that, droughts used to come every 10 years. 1972, 73, it was a drought, 82, 83, 92, 93, 2002, 2003. But right now, it's droughts every 5 years, or even less than 5 years, and also impacting the downstream industries, and the food industries as well. And there is also some resurgence of some diseases that we never saw before, which are now beginning to affect our countries because of the changes in climate. So these are discussed under adaptation. Then we've got another broad category of climate change mitigation, which we discuss issues that are causing the changes in climate. These are to do with the emissions that we are putting into the atmosphere in the agriculture sector, in the industry, in the waste, our waste dumps, in the energy sector, among other sectors. So as we emit these gases into the atmosphere, what is happening is that they are piling in the atmosphere, resulting in the energy from the sun not managing to escape back into space easily. So some escapes, but the other component of energy is kept back in the lower levels of the atmosphere, resulting in the warmer conditions that we are experiencing right now.
While we're there, Washington, what people have done over the years, like burning paper or rubbish, or even the smoking cars, or firewood all over the place, they did not understand the impact, that has on climate change. If you could say something about that, because that's where most of the problems come from. Things that we did in the past are now with us today in terms of problems.
We are the prime causes of climate change ourselves on what we do on a day-to-day basis. If it is into the raw areas, cutting down of those trees, in order for us to survive, each and every person requires a minimum of 4 trees per person in order for the tree to absorb the carbon dioxide which we are breathing out, and it produces oxygen for us to breathe in. And when you cut one tree, what is happening? It means that carbon dioxide which was supposed to be taken in by that one tree remains in the atmosphere and is part of these gases which are causing global warming. And then we have waste which we are now accumulating, so much waste. You feel the smell from the dump sites. That smell is methane gas, which warms the atmosphere 21 times more than carbon dioxide itself. We are driving very big cars now and again. Even children going to one school in the same street, you find 10 vehicles going in some direction. And these big vehicles emit some carbon monoxide, which is one of the precursor gases that once combined with oxygen, it forms carbon dioxide as well. And this is one of the gases that we are forming from there. We are lagging behind in terms of mass transportation. We're having buses in cities, buses in our suburbs, that would reduce the volumes of traffic. Even electric buses would do very well, but we are still lagging behind in that.
That's Washington Zhakata, is the Chief Director of Climate Change and Meteorological Services in the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Today we're discussing climate change and its impact on the economy, its impact on our businesses. As he said, there are a number of things that we do and they eventually affect climate change and resultantly also impact on our businesses or our economy. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We're now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we're discussing climate change and its impact on the economy or our businesses. And our guest is Washington Zhakata, who is the Chief Director, Climate Change and Meteorological Services in the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Now, you've discussed a lot of things. You've made us understand really what climate change is all about and what causes it. In fact, you are the main culprits as human beings. Certain things we do eventually impact our climate in future. Now, let's look at other important issues. You mentioned different meetings that we attend. What is it that we put across as Zimbabwe and say, as Zimbabwe, this is what we would like to see for climate change to improve in order for us, to have a better environment?
We understand how vulnerable we are as Zimbabwe in all the sectors, water, energy, agriculture, and so forth. We understand it. And we also would want to rally behind other countries globally to ensure that we improve our climate. So the debate, whilst is very contentious on these issues of climate change, we want to play our part. But one of the most critical issues that is under discussion right now is on coal. Coal is blamed for causing most of climate change.
It contributes to our economy.
And
We've got one year economy
at the same time.
Yeah.
And we have our sources of energy. Over half of our energy is derived from coal.
Yeah.
So, at the negotiations, like at COP26, which was held in Glasgow some 3 years ago, there was a declaration which came on board that we need to move away from coal and use other forms of energy for agricultural, industrial, and energy production itself. So this declaration is called the Just Transition Declaration. This is on coal phase out. So once you sign and append to that, then you are supposed to, your activities should be all aligned to phasing out of coal. But at the same time, as a country, we have so much coal in abundance to last us millions of years. And this is the form of energy that can assist us, generate our electricity much faster, much easier, because you can't drive industrial activity only on solar, only on renewable forms, unless new technologies come on board.
Well, on the coal one,
yes,
and all its impact on us in terms of phasing out coal, yet with all these resources, what is the result? Are we on the verge of also phasing out coal?
Right now, we are in a phase whereby we would want to perhaps improve our energy mix. That is energy from coal, energy from renewable forms like solar, wind, geothermal, among other things. We want to see mini hydropower generations and so forth. We want to improve on the energy mix, but not totally at the moment focusing directly on coal, because we still have, as a developing country, some leeway really to come to a peak in terms of our emissions using coal as well. Then later we start dropping the levels of coal use and moving to other forms of energy. We've got potential which is very high along the Zambezi River Basin. We've got the Devil's Gorge, we've got the Batoka Gorge, and we've got about 6 sites along the Zambezi River Basin, which combined we could generate enough energy to substitute coal entirely. But you find a country under sanctions, you cannot access resources to build that hydropower generation from the World Bank, from IMF, and other sources, European banks, because you are on sanctions. So the world watches, and then comes really to be more punitive, yet we could have sorted it out using other forms. So this impacts the economy quite negatively. The European Union has introduced a carbon tax for all goods coming from countries from abroad, and they will be looking at which goods are being processed, manufactured using too much fossil fuels, including coal, and they are going to charge a very high tax. This tax is called the CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Tax. This tax will affect, at the moment, iron and steel, will affect aluminium, fertilizers, cement, and others more. There are about 7 products which have been identified as a beginning. But it may extend also to even our meat production, that if we are using feed stocks for the livestock, that results in our livestock emitting too much methane gas, it may not also qualify and will be subjected to this tax, which is starting on 1 January 2026. This year is really for awareness raising by the European. So we need really to be strategizing ourselves on how we can go about it, because it's going to affect our economy one way or the other.
That's Washington Zhakata. He's the Chief Director in the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife, and being the Chief Director in charge of Climate Change and Meteorological Services. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the last segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing climate change. And our guest here is Washington Zhakata, who is the Chief Director, Climate Change and Meteorological Services in the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Now, I asked you earlier on about elephants. Each time we talk about COP, what comes to me is the argument about elephants. A little bit about that. Then we go into what we are doing as Zimbabwe in order to make sure that we can counter most of these punitive measures that come our way, like we're talking about the taxes that were being charged. So many things that actually are going to affect our economy as a result of such measures. And also even avoiding disasters and other things that affect our economy.
I think on elephants, the issue of elephants has been very sticky at the CITES, where the issues of wildlife are discussed. And as Zimbabwe, of course, we have huge amounts of elephants, which are failing to be accommodated by our forests, by our biodiversity in our national parks. And we have also huge stockpiles also of ivory that we could also trade and conserve the animals and also provide water resources, because the changing climate is resulting in even the water tables going further down and also water availability becoming a problem for the wildlife. So we will continue fighting for us to be allowed really to sell our ivory so that we conserve the animals and ensure that really the huge volumes are contained and also are kept in a manner that human-wildlife conflict is also minimized. Getting to what we can do, first and foremost, whilst we are working at international level, domestically, we should prepare ourselves to mainstream climate change in our development as well as in our budgets. We need the finance ministry, the treasury, to ensure that it avails resources that are adequate for all sectors to come up with the strategies that would strengthen their resilience to the impacts of climate change. We want to climate-proof all the infrastructure, all the sectors. Climate proofing is, we now need for the council to budget for reviews of any plan of an infrastructure that has been destroyed, because it has been perhaps planned in the 1940 and now we are using the same plans. So climate proofing, it should be across all sectors. So the government has developed a national adaptation plan that is now becoming mandatory for all ministries, departments and agencies, parastatals, to factor in climate change in their development plans and their budgets. So this is an exercise that is ongoing. Then at the international level, we are meeting our compliance requirements in the Climate Change Convention as well as in the Paris Agreement on reporting in a transparent manner of the status of our emissions of our gases and also how we are being impacted by climate change. This, and also we've put across our pledge that as Zimbabwe, by 2030, we can reduce our emissions, this is from 2020, by 40% per capita in the energy sector, in the agriculture sector, manufacturing and waste sectors. That we shall be doing conversions, perhaps having projects waste to energy in our dump sites, like what we have now with the Geopomona. They are going to convert waste into energy, and we want to spread that to other cities. This is one very critical issue. Then we've identified several sites for solar electricity generation schemes, which, if we put all this energy from the waste sector, from solar off-grid power stations, and so many hydropower stations are coming on board, and we also have Batoka Gorge, which I'm sure will come on board actually in the near future. We put it into the energy basket. We may see ourselves having contributed positively to emission reductions, because eventually we will see a shift from thermal power generation on its own into the other forms of energy. Industry will prefer to use hydropower generation, off-grid solar power generation, for them to have also their products have inroads into Europe, into the Americas, and so forth, because of these environmental sanctions. These are just environmental sanctions that are already being put by the developed world on our products, by saying if you are using too much coal, then we won't take them in to the European Union.
Or you'll be taxed heavy.
Or you'll be taxed heavily. So it's a situation whereby we continue to fight at the negotiations to be given leeway for us to develop independently without these limitations, as we thrive really to go green as well, because it's one of the issues that as a country we have to thrive to go green. And we are happy that we are preserving our wetlands. And in the process of preserving our wetlands, Victoria Falls has been really an accredited city as a green city right now for the next year under the Ramsar Convention, which is something that is not easy to achieve, meaning the efforts that the country is doing on wetlands is really appreciated at international level.
That's Washington Zhakata, is the Chief Director in charge of climate change and meteorological services in the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. And today we've been talking about climate change and how it impacts on our economy. He has given us several examples of how it is impacting, especially how we're now being charged taxes in other countries to make it very difficult for us to export goods. Well, if you would like to ask more questions about what has been raised in this program by Washington Zhakata, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on the screen. If you'd like to engage, again, we can continue to do so on the social media platforms that are showing on your screens. If you happen to have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So what remains is for me to thank our guest, Washington Zhakata, and the Economic Forum production crew. This is John Masu wishing you happy viewing.